Hey everyone, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. We're excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in health IT. And our guest today is Diana Van Blaricom. She's SVP of ERP Strategy at ROI Healthcare Solutions, and Jeff Tennant, Executive Vice President, AI and HIS Strategy and Services at ROI Healthcare Solutions. Welcome.
Hi, John.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you back. We've had you on the show before. We're talking about some really important topics. I think the two topics that dominate the lives of CIOs, ERP, EHR.
Absolutely.
They live, eat, breathe, and sleep that. But anyway, before we dive into that topic, Jeff, why don't you start us off? Tell us about yourself and ROI Healthcare Solutions.
Absolutely. So I'm Jeff Tennant. I'm the Executive Vice President here at ROI. And in that role, pretty much everything we do on the Meditech, Epic, Cerner/Oracle Health space, it falls up through me. ROI is a company we've been around for 27 years now, founded basically based on the need for project management in the healthcare space, right? We had a lot of strong project managers that got together, formed a company, and we've been doing this now for a very long time. So we have a very strong background in that project management space and bring those principles to every project we work on.
That's awesome. And Diana, how about yourself?
Diana Van Blaricom. I'm the Senior Vice President of ERP Strategy for ROI Healthcare Solutions, and been in this industry almost 30 years. Hard to believe it's been that long, but had the privilege of working with everyone from the CHRO, CFO, CIO in a number of different capacities. But really the best fun for me is here at ROI working to transform their business and really get into those cost savings and all of those things that we're going to talk about. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, as you mentioned, ROI Healthcare Solutions has been a trusted partner in health IT for over 2 decades. What sets your approach apart from other providers out there?
Well, I think it's the people that make up ROI. When you look at our consulting team and our leadership team, we all come from these provider backgrounds, right? So we've all worked in these organizations, we've been part of these organizations, they've been former CIOs.
Absolutely.
So we have a compassion and empathy for what they do every day, and we can solve some of the problems that they're dealing with and hopefully, bring a little joy into back to what they're doing every day.
Yeah, it's interesting how different it is when you've lived it and you have empathy for
Yes,
what they're
absolutely.
experiencing. Yeah. So Jeff, tell me, where are we at in the life cycle of technology that you're seeing with organizations today? Where are we at, from the EHR side? And then maybe you could talk about the ERP side.
Yeah, so from the EHR perspective, a lot of organizations went through their implementations in the last 10, 15 years, right? And we're seeing a lot of opportunity for optimization now, getting back to, so in some instances, getting rid of some of those workarounds that they had in place, helping them optimize that investment they've made in technology and making sure they're getting the most for what they're spending, as well as a lot of opportunity in education. And as we look at AI and navigating that, there's still a lot of mystery out there related to AI,
Sure.
But helping organizations navigate that AI transformation and where it makes sense to leverage that and where you need to really meter what the physicians and others are doing with AI.
Interesting. How do you balance that from, is the EHR vendor going to provide the AI? Do they need to look at other solutions? Do you have conversations around that with organizations?
So we have had conversations with, CIOs around that journey, right? And if their provider, say they're an Epic shop and Epic's doing some things in the AI space, absolutely you want to look at what they're doing first and see how it fits your organization. But you're also going to have, Dr. So-and-so who went to a conference and came back and said, I have to have this new tool. Right, so just really managing that and working through the transformation to where it goes. We see AI as a very valuable tool in a lot of areas, especially in the registration and revenue cycle spaces. But it's not that it's replacing people, but people who leverage that technology will be replacing people who don't.
Yeah, interesting. Diana, what about on the ERP side of things? I know that's one of your passions.
Yes, very much so. That operational excellence that we all try to achieve, but I think what's interesting is we had this wave of EHR that happened, right? We had this mandated electronic health record. And so all the energy and focus went on to that. And now that wave is over. People are looking at ERP and, they kind of pulled their head out of the sand and went, our operations are suffering. We are inefficient. We have all these manual processes. Our technology is outdated. And so now we're seeing people taking a look at, what are we going to do with that? We're going to replace, right? There's a lot of great technology out there now for a lot of the standard business processes. And a lot of folks have already gone through it. So for the folks that have been through it, now is the time to optimize, right? When you go live, that's not the end, that's the beginning. It's the way that you can continuously improve, always be kind of re-examining and tweaking. You've got a lot of great workflow tools and those types of things. And if you haven't made that transition, you better get on the train, because it's slowly pulling away, and those that don't make that transition are going to struggle.
That's interesting that you say that, because we've seen this over and over where there's this massive push and energy behind like a go live or the conversion of your ERP or whatever, like that's a huge effort. And then they're like, wait, like I just did that. Can I have a break? But you're kind of saying, no, you shouldn't. Like, how do you kind of manage that as a leader?
Yeah, it's really about having those business leaders jump on board and say, it's just the beginning, right? So it's a message of, wait, this isn't over. This is now where we begin. This is where we begin to innovate. This is where we begin to continue to further our journey with AI and workflow and some of these other tools that we have now. We have all this great, cool technology now, and it's a matter of being able to leverage it. You're not once and done. Now you're just in a space where you can actually start taking advantage of it.
Yeah. Jeff, why don't you chime in there? I mean, how should healthcare organizations be leveraging their tech investment, and how can they use that to improve their health system?
Right, so a lot of that is in education, right? So making sure that those who are using those systems understand what's there, understand the value of using it, and it really is a change management mindset and almost marketing internally, right?
Yeah,
so convincing the clinicians that you're doing this with them and not to them, right? Doing it for them and not making them do something they don't want to do. And it really is about helping them to understand the value of leveraging the technology that the organization has spent millions of dollars on to make their lives better.
Yeah, that's interesting. We see a lot of turnover in the space. I think there's a joke about CIOs lasting 3 years,
The shelf life.
Yeah, the shelf life is short, so there's a lot of transitions. I think you guys work with a lot of organizations in different transitions. So if they're, for those that are healthcare IT leaders, maybe new to their roles, whether it's a new position or they switch roles, what do you recommend they do during those first few months in that role?
Yeah, well, at ROI, we've got a great program. If you're a new CIO and even a new CFO, and you really want to make a difference and get a handle on what's going on in your organization, the first place I would start is with what we call application rationalization. And there's organizations that do it, there's organizations that talk about it, but it really has to get tactical. What are all of the systems you have across both the clinical and the operational side? A lot of people archived their data by keeping an old instance of a database around. They're paying maintenance on it, and maybe no one's looked at it in 2 years, right? There's a lot of money to be spending in case somebody needs to look it up. So Jeff's team, they've led several of these initiatives where we're looking at, and there's a lot of folks too that say, hey, I just went through, an EHR implementation and we know all our systems, and then we find 130 more, right?
Yeah,
so
it is crazy.
Yeah, it's a little nuts, but we're talking about millions of dollars in remediation of licenses and being able to archive data, take that money, redeploy it towards your ERP project or your EHR optimization, some of the other areas that you want to improve on that it may be difficult to get budget for.
Interesting. What would you add?
I would agree. I mean, it's, the first 3-6 months you're in an organization, getting a real understanding of your catalog, your application catalog. I was on a call with a CIO the other evening, and we were talking through his process, and I said, we typically, when we're working with an organization, we find 25 to 35% once we get their catalog fully formed that they didn't know existed in their ecosystem. Wow. And he goes, I'm surprised it's that low. Which is true. I mean, we sometimes find more, but it is, as Diana said, it's millions of dollars that are out there that they may or may not know is going on. We can pull those annual maintenance fees out of the system, the support for those. The most recent one we did, mid-size health system in the Midwest, $5 million of opportunity. Now there's projects that need to happen to get those cleaned up, sure, get that data archived or figure out where it's going to go. But over time, it's an annual savings of $5 to $6 million. Most organizations could use that additional money in their budget.
Yeah. And for me in my role, when we're talking about ERP strategy, we're talking about how do we choose an ERP? How do we look for the features and functions that we want? What's the timeline? What's the budget that we need? And in a lot of these organizations, you get tens and maybe hundreds of millions of dollars for your EHR, and you need maybe 6 for your ERP, and it's a uphill climb, right? So It's a great way for us to be able to sit down and in that planning and strategy say, hey, for a small investment, and I mean really small investment, we can find the money for that ERP project. And over the course of the first 6 months, you have now kind of reclaimed your budget, right? And now you're getting your team moving forward. It brings new energy into your IT staff as well, because they've been struggling supporting a lot of these applications, and being able to get everybody moving forward on this journey to some new technology. It's a big deal inside some of these organizations, especially when you start getting into some of the smaller and medium-sized hospitals.
Yeah. My theory is the ERP doesn't touch as many people as the EHR, so that's why it's not as visible.
Right?
There's not as many users, right?
Yeah.
Which makes
and,
it
and ironically, it can touch everybody in the organization, sometimes multiple times, because you might be an employee who's a manager who works in accounting, right?
Yeah, it touches them in different ways. That's a good point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and as you look at that, kind of post-implementation phase, whether it's the ERP or even the EHR, what are some key things to think about as they kind of move on from that, in many cases, journey to the cloud, especially on the ERP side of things?
Yeah. Well, I think, when people are doing their projects, oftentimes there's functionality that gets left behind, whether it's because of budget or just time, or maybe those new functions have come out since you went live, and people aren't really digesting those new releases, right? A lot of the big vendors that are in the cloud now, they do these major releases twice a year, and being able to stay up on that and move forward with it, you have to have a focused effort. And what that allows you to do then is get into that model of continuous improvement, right? Take a look at your workflow for approvals, for example, for invoices. A lot of organizations will have dollar thresholds, or they'll have roles that are in those processes. Well, if you are really following a leading practice and you have a requisition and you have a PO, you don't actually need to approve that invoice because it's already been approved twice already anyway. Three-way match that and get it out the door. So it's there's being able to reflect back and say, okay, we did the first step, and now we have the ability to really kind of tune the dials a little bit on our processes and become even more efficient and effective now that we're on these platforms.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Jeff, technology is only as good as it being adopted. It's one thing to implement it, it's another if they're not using it, right? Or even as you said, they implemented new functionality, they don't know about it, they're not using it, right? That's not useful. So how does ROI help kind of ensure that the healthcare staff are successfully embracing these new IT solutions, new product features? You talked about education, I imagine it starts there, but what do you do to help that?
So it's really working with the entire organization, right? It's not just working with the clinicians, not just working with the operational folks, but it is helping them understand how to leverage what's there. And so many times, clinicians especially, they're doing, they're taking care of patients. That's their job. The technology is there to support and help that, but if they don't know what's available to them, they may or may not be leveraging that technology to its fullest. And they're looking in 3 places to find something they could find just by one click if they knew where to look. So it's really about helping uncover those features and functionality and making sure they have the education and understanding to leverage that to do better in their jobs.
It's funny you say that. I was doing EHR training when I was back in my implementation days, and I was training them on the new features, and I was about to demonstrate the new feature, and she said, "Wait a minute, what did you just do?" And I was like, I did this to get in there. She's like, oh, you can do that?
Yeah.
And the clinician, it was like mind blowing. She's like, oh, I didn't know that. I always went and did this. I was like, oh, this is much easier. And she's like, oh, thank you. But so how do you push that information to them? Is it through regular trainings? Is it, how do you communicate with them? Hey, there are these features, or is it, at the elbow, seeing what they're doing and then saying, did you know there's a better way? Like, how do you approach that?
So some of it is that, right? Just really observing how they do it today and working with them to improve that. There's a lot of options out there from a micro-learning perspective, which is quick reminders. They can just click on their phone and say, oh yeah, this is how I do that, right? So little tools and little enhancements that we can provide are very important.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head there too. It's the micro-learnings, right? So we don't have time to sit through these hour-long webinars anymore, and nobody listens to them anyway because you're multitasking and you're losing half of it anyway. But when we do an ERP implementation, one of the things that's really, really important when we get to end-user training is what I call in-context learning, right? We're not going to put people in a classroom. We're not going to spend a week trying to figure out how to pay an invoice, right? But there are pieces within these technologies now that we can give them that process and that training in the context of the business process they're doing. So as they click through, bringing policy reminders in, on-screen guidance, just really in context help in the moment of them trying to do that process, so that it is fresh and it's in context of what they're trying to do, which means it sticks.
I like both of those. In context learning, that's powerful, and micro learnings as well. Love that. Well, Diana and Jeff, I really appreciate you sitting down with us to share these insights and perspectives. There's a lot of work to still be done in the ERP, EHR world, and I think it's some of the most impactful work because it's something that they all use every single day in their work. So I appreciate you taking time to sit down and talk with us, and thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for Healthcare IT Today on your favorite podcast application. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.